Welcome to White Pill Radio, the roughly every other episode version of Theology on Air that looks at current events, if you will, news, hot takes from a Christian point of view. This is an outgrowth of Theology on Air, which is itself an outgrowth. We have lots of outgrowths of Theology by the Pint, which is a monthly gathering of folks in Houston around craft beer where we look at theological questions, philosophical, ethical, scriptural,
cultural.
So if you're in Houston and you like debate, you like theology, you like conversation, or you like food and beer, check out theologybythepint.org and come to our events. They're monthly. They're interesting. We have them all over town. So if you live in one area, you know, we had one in Sugarland a while back. We got one coming up in, the Woodlands? Kingwood. We have some here at First Lutheran. So check us out, theologybythepint.org. Theology on Air lets us air even more laundry, if you will. We get to talk about even more things, the things we can't talk about in person. So that's what this is. So do subscribe. Find us on YouTube. We would appreciate it. And I like to say that this is these versions of White Pill Radio, we have blessed talk, but not happy talk.
No, never happy.
We want to get down and dirty. We want to talk about the real cultural issues. We are forced, by the name of the show, White Pill Radio, we are forced to find the Christian answer to some of these dark problems. And so that's what we do on the show. I'm Evan McClanahan. I'm the pastor here at First Lutheran, flhouston.org. So check us out there. And with me, as always, usually, is Sarah Stone, Grand Poobah of Theology by the Pint.
Hey, guys.
Where can people find you? Have we said it enough?
Yes, I think people know where they can find me. I'm in all the places.
Okay.
Yeah.
And frequent guest of this episode, Scotty Swingler.
That's right.
Tell us where to find you.
Swingler or Swingler? People need to know.
Swingler.
Okay.
Just say it like it's one word.
That's what I said, right?
Well, I'm doing it slowly.
Okay.
Yes. No, forget it.
It's not three syllables. Swingler.
I don't mean the slow part. I mean the hard G. Is it Swingler?
Swingler.
Yeah. Got it.
Okay.
Copy that.
I'm Scotty Swingler.
I think it should be a silent G myself.
I'm the student pastor at Sugarland Baptist Church. I hang out with youth and college students there and have a great time and think we do great ministry. So
that is a solid church. Both of these, all the churches represented here are great churches. If you don't have one, you should visit them.
Sugarlandbaptist.org is our website.
Cool. All right, well, let's jump in. We got the theme as we were kind of looking at the articles for this episode is like something seems to be wrong in America. I'm going to try to find a white pill on that by the end of the show. But the doctor's report is in and we're not well. So Scotty, start us off. This is an article from Time Magazine. Tell us about it.
Yeah, so a couple days ago, Time Magazine, I actually saw NPR, their story on this first, and then Time Magazine has an article. The USA falls out of the top 20 happiest countries for the first time ever. This is you can take this with a grain of salt or not, but there's a world happiness report. They've been doing this for a dozen years. This was the first one they'd released post-COVID-19. I think the lowest the United States had been before this was maybe 15, and the United States fell to 25. Their reasoning for this, the way this works, they ask people in each country to rate themselves, I think on a scale of 1 to 10 of just like, how happy are you? And maybe a few specific questions with that. And interestingly, in America, people over 60 were pretty consistently very, very happy, 9s, 10s. And it was all people under 30. It was young people. It was Gen Z that was reporting very low and brought America's score down by a lot. And I find this interesting because I've just noted, I'm 31, so I'm kind of right there bridging that gap. And I've noted with my students, there does seem to be, and I've said this to y'all before, a bigger sense of like, frequent existential dread that kind of comes with going to college or life transition. There seems to be more anxiety around social relationships. Certainly some of that's coming out of the pandemic. Some of that's, where's some of that coming from? And we've talked before, there's all this pressure, social media culture, contemporary pop culture to have a brand and an identity and to market yourself and
be different.
To stand out and be an individual and discover yourself. And all of these things I think are interesting. Not to mention, Evan could probably go off on some of this, financial crises that are just so great and put the most pressure on young people, student loan crises, et cetera. And so,
I think like the American dream is dead. That's for a
yeah,
lot of people, so that would lead to
but it's just interesting to me. Like we have data, it's polling data, but data that would suggest America's less happy
Yeah.
than before.
Well, polls are good for trends, if nothing else. And if they do it the same way year in and year out, then it does matter that we're out of the top 20. But I guess my question is something like, well, what makes a person happy? Like what, because I think about a C.S. Lewis quote, and I'm not the first to like quote Lewis all the time, but because I think it kind of be overdone. But he talks about something like, I can't remember, but it's something like, if you look within for happiness, you'll never find it. But if you aim for heaven, you'll get both, or something like that. So it's
That's spot on. You nailed it.
No, I did not.
I know.
Stop that.
But,
Okay. But you know what I'm saying.
got the gist.
So it's like, so we definitely live in a time in the last, say, 50 years where, the inward movement of the self, looking into the self, trying to discover happiness. In fact, I preached about this last week. There's a YouTube documentary. It's about 20 years old. It's called The Century of the Self. And it basically looks at how Freud's psychology and then his critics, their version of psychology, have kind of run the West, basically, like everything we've done in terms of propaganda, marketing, big business, corporations, stuff the left used to kind of complain about, like justifying wars, was basically done through manipulative techniques that the world of psychology kind of brought to the fore. And so anyway, so in a very real sense, we've been kind of living through this psychological experiment where psychological insights have changed the way that we live and the way that we think about the world. And so a lot of that, like kind of post-Freud, were the idea of like Maslow and Marcuse, basically people saying the goal of humanity is to find enlightenment, but self-actualization, self-realization. And so that ultimately, if you look at like, what's his name? Carl Truman's book, The Triumph of the Self.
Yeah.
And this documentary is called The Century of the Self. The movement has obviously gone from, as someone used to say, magazines used to be called Time and Life, and then it was called People, and now they're called Self.
Oh,
right?
that's interesting.
So we're increasingly like looking within, trying to find out who we really are. And obviously people would say that leads to the trans movement.
It sounds like this great opportunity, like for self-discovery and freedom to like know who you are and express who you are. But it ends up being all this pressure to, like you said, like have your brand or be something different. Or the pressure is find all the fulfillment that you need from within, not from without. And that's just, as Christians, we just don't think that's how it works. Like,
if you could put it on a graph, it seems to be the more interest in self-actualization, the less happy we get.
Right.
It seems to be like a parallel, or not parallel, but like what, you know what I'm saying? Like the more of one, the less you get of the other.
Inverse
I was always bad at algebra,
inverse.
so thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm not surprised at this. I mean, you could also look at the pharmaceutical industry and the way that, we've messed with one of the trends going on among young people, it seems like, I heard about this today, was like a lot fewer women are taking birth control pills because they basically view it as hormonal poison. And there are, in the conservative space, I think, more, and maybe in the liberal space too, like fewer and fewer people are like they're getting off of drugs that regulate their hormones because it seems like depression seems to follow. So it's also another inverse relationship. Seems to be more pharmaceuticals like antidepressants, less happiness.
Yeah.
So what's happening?
Well, and I'm just to throw another thing in there, and I was going to look for an article by Jonathan. Is it Haidt or Haidt? H-A-I-D-T. You guys have heard of him. He's a, I don't know, sociologist or something. Smart guy. And he's just done a ton of research and talks on basically like millennials and Gen Z, mostly Gen Z. And he would say that everything started taking a sharp decline around 2012 when cell phones became regularly available.
I would agree with that.
And the idea is not just because social media didn't start really with the popularity it has now at the same time that smartphones came out. I mean, yeah, you could, but it was just the isolation of everything I need is at my fingertips. I no longer need to go into the world, interact with the world, look at people's faces when I talk to them, get a reaction when I say something that's unkind. Louis C.K. did a bit about this, like 20 years ago. Well, I don't know how many, a lot of years ago, where he said he won't let his daughters have cell phones because he wants them to call people a name on the playground and see the look of hurt on their face and know, ooh, I don't like the way that feels on me. Like, and so that must not be how we ought to interact, Anyway, I think.
Yeah, it's a social cue, you might even say. Where, that you miss online. I mean, I'm not really, sometimes when I'm writing, I guess I'm kind of happy, but generally speaking, being on a computer being on this foreign object doesn't bring me joy. When I think about what I really like doing, I like throwing a baseball with my kid.
Yeah.
You know, I like playing in the dirt on this roof right here where the zucchini is starting to come out. And every day I come out and I'm like, a leaf is coming out of the ground.
It's so exciting.
Look at what I've done.
Here's what's so fascinating. Here's where like psychology and understanding the brain helps us. Social media, or really anything poisonous we do on our smartphones, it gives us dopamine hits.
Yep.
And so we get this sense of pleasure,
Right.
this sense of
Immediate
reward,
satisfaction. Yeah.
right?
Right.
But it's not actually doing that fulfillment. This is where I think Christians, we talk about spiritual fulfillment, right?
Yeah.
Like fulfillment that goes beyond what happens in our mind, in our brain. So it's like this spiraling cycle, right? And I find it interesting. We're having all this conversation about social media, self-actualization leading to this. I think that's all true. And then the end of this article, though, talks about loneliness as a public health crisis. And then the 2 reasons the American Psychological Association says Gen Z adults are more stressed than other generations are health and finances. And so again,
Like fear of health stuff and fear of.
I think with health, we'd probably talk about mental health,
Yeah.
which we're going to talk about in a second. And then finances, just I mentioned it up top, like,
Well,
you know, I've said
Fear
this.
of scarcity.
I've said this on this podcast before. Like when my dad was my age, they were having their second kid and they were on their second house. My wife and I still can't afford a home, and that's
Yeah.
not because we don't both work and make a decent living, and we're not stupid with our money. It's
Right.
just the world is shifting to where it's more and more difficult to financially advance, financially, benefit.
Yeah, 10 years ago, Charlie Kirk was talking about this today. It's like 10 years ago, the average income you needed to buy a home, an average home, was like $60,000 a year. Now it's $110,000 a year. I mean, so basically housing prices have doubled in a decade.
Well, that's great news for you because you're in ministry and they make a ton of money.
Right. I mean, thank God. We bought our house like in 2010, and I mean, otherwise I couldn't afford my own home. It's crazy. And so we did a whole White Pill episode a while back where I talked about just the national debt, and it's like, what does that have to do with it? It has everything to do with everything.
Yeah.
Like money supply is like the one thing the government should get right, and I mean, we have to end the Fed. Okay. So I mean, seriously, it's like it's theft. They are stealing from you. But by deflating the currency, this is what the problem was when the Roman Empire. Like basically, for thousands of years we had like a stable money supply, and then they we're a little bit less silver, and all of a sudden everyone knew the money was worthless because it was lead and not silver, and it created great instability. It leads to wars, it leads to death, it leads to famine. These are very real social justice issues if you want to get mad about it, and yet it's like platitudes and pithy comments about loving people is like the only thing people can think about when they think about politics. Like no. Like the money supply, people, that's where it's at. You want the American dream, you want a house, you want a car, you want to have kids. So why are people unhappy? They don't see a future. They don't have a future. It's going to be, I mean, I'm sitting here like, when are my kids going to get out of my house? Like, it's going to be really hard. Like, they're going to have to buy some crappy house, and I'm going to have to be like putting up the sheetrock because of what, or they're going to have to like go out in the country, and like have goats and stuff.
Yeah, there's going to have to be some really radical social change, priority change to remedy any of that, I think.
Well, how about this? Here's a radical idea. The 2019 budget. We right now, the American, not to make this about economics and politics, but right now the government takes in about $5 trillion a year. Okay, the president just put out a $7.2 trillion budget. So he is basically saying, hey, we're going to run a $2.2 trillion deficit infinitely. What do you think that's going to do to the money supply? Let me think about this for a second. If we just go back to a 2019 budget, when last I checked, the federal government was more than big enough, we'd have a balanced budget right now, and we could actually start to pay on that debt. But they don't want to pay down the debt. They want to. This is a strategy. This is a plan. It's not accidental that they're running a $1 trillion deficit every 100 days. But it is against you. It is against your children. And it is a moral issue. So okay, but sorry, that was a rant.
Well, it's a relevant rant.
But again,
people feel hopeless.
Gen Z would tell you. I mean, Gen Z would resonate with the idea. Where, like, how am I going to make money? I mean, I've got kids. I'm editing an essay today for a student applying for a scholarship that says, I am terrified of taking out student loans and having them forever. I'm terrified of getting a job as soon as I get out that doesn't even pay me enough to get a home. This is all very
There are solutions.
This is part of that existential dread.
So what are or do we maybe want to knock out the next, because we're literally talking. Okay, so then what are the solutions?
Well, Well, I still think we have to answer the fundamental question, like what makes you happy? And I think what makes I'll go back to an old canard. Rush Limbaugh would talk about this. The self-esteem movement. Remember when that was real big? There's the self again, right? And it's like, well, you feel good about yourself when you accomplish something. So we kind of pick on the, like, every kid gets a trophy at the end of the baseball game. We kind of pick on that. But, like, there's some truth in that. The truth is that you do feel good about yourself when you, like, accomplish things, when you're pushed to accomplish things. If everyone's a winner, then you don't actually accomplish it. You don't actually have pride in yourself. So that's a real thing. I think we need to get back to like encouraging children to do their best instead of just saying, oh, you're a victim, or, oh, everyone's the same.
I think talking to students about that idea, though, there's an inclusivism that's happened that needs to remain. So there used to be a very narrow definition of what successful looked like, whether it was the best football player,
for sure,
the most the one that could get the best SAT score.
Yes.
I want all kids in my youth group to have that achievement, but it's going to look different based on your gifts, your personality, your mental capacity, et cetera.
Right. Well, that's part of the solution too. That So we're doing this, I've talked about it before, like a hybrid high school, college program with our homeschool kids. And so it's like, people worry about like $100,000 of student loan debt. Like, am I going to get a job? Like, you can cheat the system. Like, you can get a college degree for very cheap. It might not be the degree you want, but like you can break the system. There are lots of very well-paying jobs for like relatively low education if you're willing to do them.
Right.
If you're willing to be a carpenter or a plumber or something like that. So there are ways out. I think Christians need to be the ones who lead the way and like not going along with the party line anymore. You know?
I agree.
And I put it forth as like our theology by the pint events, like as a topic to talk about, like Christians getting off the grid, and this is what I'm talking about, and no one ever votes for it. So, but yeah, I think I do want to talk about the serotonin dopamine thing though. But you want to say something?
I was just going to finish that. One of my favorite quotes from John Foreman is he said, "The idea that a pastor is more spiritual than a high school janitor is completely flawed." And 100%. And so I know we all agree on this, but the church, I would just echo what you said, needs to advocate for the goodness and the beauty and the goodness is the best word. The goodness of every form of work, every form of, whatever God has called you into.
It's the Reformation doctrine of vocation. The cliche is like the woman who's changing her baby's diapers is doing the Lord's work more than or as much as the monk, praying in the monastery or something.
Right.
And that wasn't the idea of the Reformation at all. There was a caste system where the priest essentially was at the top, and the mother changing the dirty diaper was at the bottom. So the Reformation brought that to the fore, and that's a good thing. But at some point there was someone in this room, and we were talking about homeschooling, and I don't remember who it was now. I can't remember. What y'all, but they were like, I want my kids to go to an elite university. And I was like, that's the problem. Like you have to stop wanting that for your children. Like you have to break the system. Okay. So until we're willing to do that as Christians, we're kind of part of the problem because we're feeding the beast.
Go ahead.
If you want to use the language of elite university, you don't read how those universities get ranked and make themselves appear elite.
Oh, I wouldn't even want to know. It's probably
sinister.
Pretty dirty, huh?
It's sinister.
No, go ahead. Yeah.
Well, I was just going to say there's another element to all of this. I mean, we're talking about some of the practical pieces, and these all dovetail together. But I think there is something else about when you talk about loneliness. I think about identity and who we are in relation to God. And I mean, I realize that at the end of the day, all our white pill takes are going to be the Sunday school answer of Jesus, because he does make everything better. I mean, he does. Yeah. I think about this one time years ago when I was going through my divorce, and I was driving down the West Park Tollway to this lady's house that we were like squatting at because we were like in between. I mean, it was just a dark time, and I got an email. This was really late at night. I shouldn't have been reading my phone while I was driving, but I was. And I got an email that was like devastating news about stuff that was going on, potential custody, whatever. It turned out fine. But in that moment, I felt my whole world kind of like crashing down, and I thought, I have to talk to someone. But it was way too late to call my family on the East Coast. And so I'm like, I'll reach out to my sister on the West Coast because they're a little... She didn't answer. And I had this existential moment where I was like, I'm utterly alone. Like I'm on this drive. There are no other cars out there because it's late. And none of my family can answer the phone. Like maybe I have friends on the West Coast. But in this moment, I just had this thought, like, it's only me. And then I had this like, oh, wait, it's not only me. Like, I actually believe that there's a God out there who actually wants to communicate with me and be known and for me to communicate with. And so I prayed like, one of the most honest prayers of my life, like just through tears and sort of groans, like, I am desperate and you're all I have, which I'm sure is a great thing to hear. But God gets a lot of those prayers. Yeah. I think that we're because of smartphones and because of all of this kind of individual focus on the inner self, we forget that there's a tether to something bigger, and not just a God, but the God who created the whole world and you and made you in his image and loved you so much that even when you were giving him the middle finger of rebellion, died to rescue you. Like, that's a game changer when it comes to loneliness. And I don't mean to say that if you pray alone in your car, you will be happy, because there's plenty of people that are still depressed that can pray. But it helps to just know that there's something outside of yourself that has you. And like, even in death has you. Anyway.
Yeah. I mean, it's hard for me to imagine someone being, again, it's another inverse relationship where every poll says fewer people go to church, fewer people believe in God, and we're getting more lonely and less happy. Is anyone going to connect the dots? I mean, and it's like when we do it, we're just churchy people just recruiting or whatever.
The last time I was in here, we talked about church gatherings that have no particular religion to them. Remember, we were talking about people want to go to church, but they don't want to actually believe anything.
Right.
The atheist church.
Yeah.
It's like, well, yeah, I understand that sentiment and wanting, I understand why
Community.
people, they need that, that community and stuff. But it's like, this is God's world. We are God's children. And to try to make sense of life apart from him is, it's impossible.
Well, community, you guys know I'm a big fan. I'm constantly trying to create community. And I think it's essential, and I think it's the way we're supposed to do life. But it will fail you. Community will fail you. Well, like, if you're like, what I need is a good friend. Yes. And also, they're going to be terrible to you at some point.
Well, every Christian should read Bonhoeffer's Life Together.
Yes.
So there's a very realistic understanding of what community is. I mean, I always think of like the person who like idealizes going into the monastery and like singing the Psalms all day, and like that's all they ever want to do. And then like the guy next to them doesn't have an ear, so it's like he's always out of pitch, and it's like, this isn't what I imagined at all. No one can sing. Anyway, related. Okay, let's keep moving. Related. This is a big poll that came out. I saw it quoted in a lot of different places. It's related. 42%, this is from psychiatrist.com, survey, 42% of Gen Z diagnosed with a mental health condition. Summary, 42% of Gen Z has received a mental health diagnosis. The most common diagnosis for the younger generation is anxiety, followed by depression, ADHD, and PTSD. About 20% of Gen Z has been to therapy, and 60% are on medication. Wait a minute, that can't be right. How can 20% have been to therapy, but 60% are on medication?
Hey guys, Sarah here. Sorry to interrupt what I'm sure is an amazing podcast episode, but I just wanted to tell you that Theology by the Pint is growing. We are now a 501c3 nonprofit organization, and we're expanding. This coming year, with your help, we'll grow our reach by adding events in multiple Houston suburbs, as well as launch a youth version. Don't worry, those will be pints of iced coffee, not beer. We're adding follow-up conversations to reach the spiritually curious and the unchurched. We're also growing our connections and partnerships with more local churches, and you can help us grow by praying for us, by telling your friends or church about us, and of course, by partnering with us financially. To donate, go to theologybythepint.org/give. If each of our podcast listeners gave $100, we would reach our annual budget right then. Consider donating today. Okay, enjoy the rest of the show. You can get it from regular doctors and psychiatrists. Psychiatrists don't often do like talk therapy.
Right.
Seems like that number should be the same though, right? Like you should
be, but it's not.
Okay.
Yes.
Says the counselor. Okay. And I'm with you. Okay. Gen Z is worried about the future, but also feel they are the generation most capable of talking through their problems. Anyway, I mentioned wanting to go back to the serotonin dopamine thing. I don't really understand this. Yes. So social media is like a dopamine hit in the same way that, naughty things are, shoplifting. There are things that we do that are wrong, and the risk and the danger of them is precisely what brings the dopamine, like jumping out of a plane with a parachute, Okay. SSRI. Serotonin, something.
Reuptake, something inhibitor, something. Oh, dang
so
it.
in the last year or two, there were a lot of articles basically saying, they don't work. So the entire school of thought that the reason we're depressed is because we have too much serotonin and not enough dopamine, and so the drugs balance us out. And so basically you have all these, so much people are on SSRIs that they're literally in the drinking water because they get peed out and refiltered through. That's weird. So
everyone should be happy.
am I right? Is my scientific, do y'all know anything about this? Am I right?
I read a couple articles about SSRIs. I don't know enough to speak confidently, except to say one of the things, we actually were chatting about this before this started. As a mom of a teenager, I've had to read up on this, that several antidepressants can actually, and like not a small percentage of the time, increase suicidal ideation and depression.
Yeah.
Which is a real gamble.
Yeah.
I'm not saying that people shouldn't.
Crazy.
I don't want to be the person that says people shouldn't take antidepressants. I think there's a place for them for sure.
Well, it's like Ritalin. Like you can take Ritalin when you're like before puberty, but after it's like something, it does the opposite to your brain or something.
Oh, interesting.
I'm not a doctor. Don't take medical advice from me. Okay.
No one is taking medical advice.
Well, just in case. Yeah. But it's like, I guess both of these articles kind of point out to me like the experiment has failed. We're doing something wrong, obviously.
Well, I'm going to say something that's a really hot take, considering that I have my master's in counseling and used to be a therapist.
Yep.
I'm a big fan of therapy, and also this feels like a generation that is over therapized, but not actually healing. So it's funny because they say 20% of them are in therapy, and then it says they're the most capable about talking through their problems. So I'm saying that maybe talking through your problems isn't enough.
No, this is all anecdotal, and it's only my very narrow scope. So, disclaimer. My observation is they are, I would say Gen Z, my students, as I think about them, infinitely better at not stigmatizing mental health struggles, at seeking help when there is a struggle. I don't think they're actually going to therapy. I don't think they're actually better.
But they're okay if you go to therapy.
Correct.
Right.
No,
I
can't.
That's brave.
No. And I can't tell you how many students, I'll just be real with you guys, like my high school seniors, my college students, they show more concern for my mental well-being than most of my peers. They're very aware.
Yeah.
And they can tell something's off. I mean, they've correctly identified when I'm struggling. They encourage me, go to therapy, go to a doctor. But when I fire that same thing back, there's still some level of, well, I don't want to be a burden. I don't want to, like, I think that 20% number is probably accurate.
Right, but then why does it talk about they feel the best about talking through their problems? And I think that's true.
Because they're fine vaguely saying, oh yeah, like
I'm talking to my friends.
I'm depressed or I have ADHD. Like they're
the sort of admitting part.
They're very
naming.
open about it. Yeah, there's not a stigma. You're not going to shame me if I tell you.
Okay,
that
it's more about identifying, not actually like parsing
addressing.
things out. Yeah.
Correct.
Okay.
I think so.
Yeah.
That's how
But within therapy, there needs to be a telos, to use a big word, right? There needs to be an end goal. There needs to be a design. There needs to be a purpose.
Yep.
And I mean, Matt Walsh did a whole thing recently about, modern therapy and, kind of bashing it and because it doesn't have a telos. I mean,
some of it doesn't.
Well,
Yeah.
and that's what I was going to say.
That's why there's a whole like Christian counselor genre. Because it's like because the secular counselor, where are they leading people?
Well, this is what I was going to say about medication too. I think it's hard to paint any of it with a broad brush because I think you have therapists that have an end goal. You have therapists that are trying to heal people, and you have therapists that aren't. And I think it's the same with medication. Medication works very well. I know people that medication saved their life, changed their life, has made recovery possible, and I know people that it's made things worse and it didn't help. And
or it becomes a crutch.
My wife's a therapist for children and not in a Christian organization, but will tell people up front day one as we're admitting a client, this is family therapy. We're working towards solutions. We're working towards goals. Like our goal is to get you out of here.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
And so that's where I would just say for anyone listening that might, well, I'm depressed or I need therapy. You just need to know who you're talking to and know your goals up front.
Yeah.
You need to know. I think that's an important warning. You need to know I'm seeing someone who's trying to help me heal so I don't need constant treatment.
Yes. I'm going to be doing this for years on end.
Someone who's going to be my best pal once a week for the next 5 years so they can get $100 from me every week.
Yeah.
I think you named half of it. I think people think of a therapist as a new friend. And I've heard people talk about this. Well, my therapist thinks this, and she would know me because we've been seeing each other for 6 years. bro, like you need a drinking buddy. I'm joking about the drinking part, but like
Golfing.
you need an actual friend. But a therapist is not your friend. A therapist should be someone that's going to help guide you on
professional.
self-discovery about what's going on and then move you toward a solution.
Yes.
Well, that reminds me of the Jordan Peterson issues a while back. I mean, he talks about this one like, what is a woman? Make of that what you will. But it's like the goal of the therapist is not to affirm you.
Right.
But if that's what the state basically is going to say, that's what the therapist must do this because you can't have conversion therapy and however that's defined. It's like this is not what therapy is. It's not affirming. It's you're coming with a problem. We have to figure out how to solve that.
I will say one other thing about when I when I read this article. Again, I'm being a really bad therapist right now, but I think, in every generation, there's like an overused, overdiagnosed thing. It was like ADD for a while, and then it was bipolar for a while. And now, and I know that some people have this and it's awful. But PTSD, y'all, we need to stop with everyone having PTSD.
It used to be like shell shock in World War I.
Yeah, or actually like an abused spouse or someone who was sexually harassed or traumatized, hurt. There are plenty of things that are actual trauma. There's a Christian counselor here in town who is beloved by everyone who knows him, who talks about big T and little t trauma. And I think that's a really helpful distinction that everybody has little t trauma. And it's actually really helpful to kind of think through your life. Like, where has little t trauma happened? And maybe you've held on to it and you've turned it into big T trauma. But not everyone has PTSD. Settle down about PTSD. Oh my gosh. Okay. And I say that partly because it does take the sort of focus or the heaviness and weightiness away from when you have actual victims of like spousal abuse that have endured trauma, big T trauma, and someone else is like, well, I didn't get into the school I wanted, and it was just so traumatic. I have PTSD, or just making jokes about it. It's not a good look.
Yeah.
Or a veteran who can't hold a job because any loud noise disables them. I mean, there's serious, Yeah. I like that. I've never heard that before. Big T, little t.
It's handy.
I think that's good.
And if we were to use that, I think we would also, because his whole thing is identify it and sort of locate how that actually affects your life, because then you can actually get past it. It is, I mean, little t trauma is not going to necessarily live with you the rest of your life and you'll never be the same. You can actually come to a point where you're like, I'm no longer ruled by that, And you can actually be healed from that. Of course, you can also be healed from big T trauma, but yeah.
And I'm definitely not opposed to people talking through things. I just, my issue is like in the world of psychiatry, given the degrees they have to get and the places where they get those degrees, I'm constantly thinking like, well, what is the worldview? Because everything you do, AI has a worldview, psychiatry has a worldview, apologetics has a worldview, everything has kind of a worldview. So it's like, what are they bringing to the conversation, to the therapy? What is the ultimate, bless you. What is the ultimate sort of goal they want to get out of it? And I don't know how a Christian, because that's kind of our audience, I guess. I don't know if that is like really compatible with what like a secular therapist would seek to do. So
depends on the therapist.
Yeah,
it does depend on the therapist. But I will say, as someone that got a degree at a seminary for Christian counseling, I was very close with someone who is not a Christian that was going to go to therapy, but I still wanted for this friend of mine to go to a Christian therapist, even if they never talk about Jesus or scripture or anything, because I want to know that the person that is trying to help me heal or my close friend heal believes in healing and believes that they're made in God's image, worthy, all of those things.
Right.
I think it does change things for your therapist to have a worldview that's correct.
Yeah. Well, I would say if you find yourself unhappy or anxious, plant some food.
No, but for real, that is legit therapy. When you garden and you see those shoots come up.
Well, listen, we have to. This is you guys both know me well enough to know I am not go back to the oldest possible thing because the ancients are always right.
Yeah.
But the ancient Israelites were onto something because they were holistic. It was mind, body, spirit, soul were all integrated. So like, I think therapy is great. I think that's good for your mind. I think you should do it. But if you're not also caring for your body, right?
Yeah.
I mean, I tell students, they've heard me quote it so many times. What did Elijah need when he wanted to die? Sleep and eat this cake.
Take a nap and
Drink
have an
some
angel
water,
bring you some food.
Eat this cake, and then climb a mountain.
Yeah.
I mean, we have to take care of our body. We have to take care of our spirit. We have to take care of our mind. I mean, all these ingredients go together. It's not
Yeah.
one or the
It's a
other.
cliche, but when people say touch grass, now, I mean, like it's
does
for real.
help.
Like I think there's definitely a component of being physically active. It's funny that like working out is not considered like a conservative thing. Being fit, like that's,
Is it?
Yes.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh yeah. If you like,
I know a lot of very progressive people who work out every day.
yeah, but it's wrong to say body shame, right? See, now you're getting so basically.
Well, that's bullying, but
Well,
I'm not going to bully someone for what they look like.
Maybe it is, but maybe it's maybe one of the reasons you're so unhappy is that you're unhealthy.
Sure.
And maybe like, I don't know, exercising would be good for you. Talk about natural dopamine or whatever.
Right.
That's true. I will
runner's high and all
say,
that.
every time I've had a breakup and I go work out, it's like the one moment where I'm not so sad when you're working out.
Yeah.
If you want to do nightclub cardio with me, hit me up. It's a real thing. I do that, y'all. Every week.
Everything about that sounds horrible. But
I knew that at one point.
Would you
yeah.
say everything about that sentence is
Yeah,
what?
nightclub, terrible. Cardio, terrible. Okay,
I don't know. Cardio is really good for you.
but I do my own yard work, and that's like exercise, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
All right. Next article. Well, this will be very quick. I don't really have any like hot takes that haven't already been made, and it's like a week old now. But there was a major case before the Supreme Court. It's this Biden v. Missouri. It's now called Murphy v. Missouri, and it's basically getting back to those days when social media seemed to be working with the government to limit what information people could get about COVID and the vaccine. So if you remember the good old days of 2020 and 2021 where people were wondering
He's being tongue in cheek about good old days.
if like ivermectin actually helps you. Well, the guy that says ivermectin's good, well, boom, he gets nuked off of Twitter and Facebook and everything else. And later we, get access to emails where the FBI is like, get that dude off the internet right now.
Yeah.
Well, that's kind of weird. I didn't think the government could restrict free speech.
Yeah.
Oh, they can't, but they can coerce someone else to because they regulate those companies. Okay.
Yeah.
So that's what the whole case is about. And well, Ketanji Brown Jackson probably got the single most quotable moment out of that. And she says this, she says, my biggest concern is that your view, this is the view of the people bringing the case, the people who are against the censorship. Okay.
Right.
Your view has the First Amendment hamstringing the government in significant ways in the most important time periods. Correct.
Yes, that's the point of the First Amendment.
Congress shall pass no law restricting free speech, free exercise of religion, free assembly, etc. The Bill of Rights was signed, was written to protect us from the government. That's what makes America this unique and wonderful experiment in a social contract. And so if you want to know, people talk about why, right and left and what is the difference? And it's interesting that kind of liberals, we kind of think of as coming out of the 60s and free speech advocates and, and free love and free this and free that and everything is free. And it's and now the leftists on the court seem to be saying, we really think the government needs to shut people up in important time periods. Who gets to determine what's important? By what standard is important? I mean, I don't even use the word pandemic. It wasn't a pandemic in any sense of the word, and it wasn't a vaccine either. So I'll just be
okay.
Okay.
Now you just shifted the conversation.
But I'm saying but if you front load all of those assumptions into all the arguments, then they can say anything is an emergency, and they can shut us up on free speech.
So
the whole point of the First Amendment is to be able to get access to information and make your decisions. And the Supreme Court, and a lot of people think that her side, if you will, is going to win this. That is literally, they are now literally saying
that's scary.
Yeah, the First Amendment hamstrings the government. That's a problem. No, that's the solution.
That's the point.
So it's kind of worrisome because today's pandemic is tomorrow's
war in Ukraine, war in Gaza.
Name it.
Yeah,
they can.
Taiwan.
Yeah. I mean, if COVID-19 was a significant enough threat so that they can curtail speech, then anything can be, because the survival rate was under 1%, it was over 99%. Okay.
Yeah.
And only certain people were most affected by it. Virtually no children died from it, and on and on. So it's I don't know.
I think the point is, even if it was terrible, there are many terrible things.
Yes.
And there are going to continue to be many terrible things.
And even if some of the information spread was wrong, that's also protected by the First
Well, also,
Amendment.
you can Google right now and find wrong information on anything. I mean,
Yeah.
just theologically, when I've been looking stuff up for my Revelation study, you're
Yeah.
going to find some doozies out there.
I believe it.
Sometimes
Yeah.
weird stuff,
Yeah.
Or people that call it revelations. That's
Yeah.
misinformation.
That is misinformation. It's the
Someone needs to put a
apocalypse,
stop to it.
The revelation. Yeah, it's all contained in one thing. So
But I agree that that's scary. I mean, you already noticed if there's certain things you're Googling, you can feel if you know that there's more out there, you can see that you tend to get things or even suggestions on prompts that kind of err one direction.
yeah.
Yeah, I'm not about that. You don't use Google. How do you get your information?
I use a browser called Brave, and I use their native search engine, which
that
I
is
agree
so
is not very
brave.
good. I mean, I was joking for this group me or this our group me chat about this thing. Like you were like, you need to look this up. You didn't say it like that. You said it nicely. You're like, Google this, and I was like, well, I don't use Google. Ha ha ha.
And then I almost sent you a let me Google that for you, which is
I,
always
it's-
great.
I literally didn't use Google, and I literally couldn't find the information. So I literally typed in google.com and put it in the search bar and found what I needed. So yeah, it is a better search engine, but for my browser, I use Brave. I'm trying to, be less trackable or what have you.
Ooh. Also, my daughter, if she were here, would say, you don't have to type Google into the search bar.
Well, I do in Brave. That's the point.
Oh, it's a.
So
what
I
do you call
use
it?
their search bar, but they use, I don't know what search engine they use. I think it's their native search engine, but it's not as good. Anyway, the question is
Nifty.
like, I think that's concerning. So yeah, I don't know if you guys have thoughts on that or not.
I mean, I give you my thoughts. I think it's scary. And Ketanji, she is known for a mic drop moment of things that are stupid to say. I'm sorry. But that thing about the First Amendment is dumb. And then I'm not a biologist. That'll be quotable for a decade.
Yeah. Well, yeah.
Do you hate this right now? Are you uncomfortable?
No, I'm not uncomfortable.
Okay.
I love the First Amendment.
Yeah. Do you love Ketanji Brown Jackson?
I don't know enough about her.
Yeah.
I don't keep up.
Well,
with
it's
her.
not personal. I mean, she's not alone in thinking this. She's just the one who said it, which is basically like we're gonna have in a free society. We're gonna have this, right? Like you can't yell fire in a crowded theater. Okay, so there are some limits on speech.
So that's part of my question. Is it is so difficult. I don't know how we define any line of what's dangerous and what's not.
Yeah.
What's truly information, what's not. Who's qualified to say what about what subject or not? Like it's all subjective.
Well, and when does something hateful become like?
Yeah, right. Dangerous. Right. And then I wonder. I kind of said this provocatively before we started recording. Like, is social media the same as speech? I think that's an interesting conversation.
Yeah, it is.
Is my ability to express myself online the same as free speech? I'm not sure.
I mean, and the other biggest quotation I saw, like being quoted from the whole all these oral arguments, was Sam Alito, where he was saying, "You guys don't do this to the New York Times.
Yeah.
You don't do this to the print media.
Right.
So." Yes, I think that just goes to say even more that social media is 100% where we are having speech. This is where we're sharing information, right or wrong.
But should it be?
And then you guys know how I am, 'cause
whether-
I'm not beholden to either political party or ideology. It's funny that when it's First Amendment about free speech and over this subject in particular, it's conservatives that are really excited about the First Amendment. But when we talk about freedom to assemble, it's still usually like, I don't think many conservatives were very happy about Black Lives Matter assemblies and marches and
Assemblies
and
were
things to
fine.
go.
Marches were fine.
Well, that was because that was when they told us to stay home. So it was a hypocrisy. They said we can't go to church.
Well, either we have the right to do it or we don't. So
Well, no, conservatives, I would say, had the right to do it, but then the government doesn't get to tell us you can't go to church.
Sure.
Well,
You
not
can't
to
have it both
mention,
ways.
even if COVID weren't happening, there's a difference between assembling and rioting.
Well, for sure.
Sure. I agree with that.
I assume we're talking about,
Just
peaceful
the
gathering.
marches.
But yes, generally speaking, so what? Oh man, I'm not going to bring up January 6th. So
That sounds wise, except you just did. But
yeah. Anyway, but yes, so
and it does get very gray and dicey because I like the idea of free speech, but then there are some areas where I realize, I don't want full free speech.
I agree.
yeah, so like
almost segues into
I'm not in favor of like well, we talked about this before. Like El Salvador has made MS-13 essentially like it's like the swastika in Germany. Like it's not allowed. Like, because that's how they're getting rid of the gangs, and that's how they've made El Salvador a safe place. But they consider Bukele, the president, some people consider him like a dictator. because he's using all these emergency actions to curtail, to make certain images or phrases like illegal.
Yeah.
So I think he's right in doing that. So yes, it can be dicey. The thing is, though, like, I don't know. I guess for me, it's so obvious that COVID-19 was like a gigantic. I'm going to try to not get us banned from YouTube. Let's just say we didn't know a lot, and it turned out not to be as bad as they said, and the vaccine didn't do what they said. So the spreaders of misinformation were the public sources. The government spread misinformation. They said it was this deadly thing. They said the vaccine would prevent transmission.
I know
all of that was wrong.
I know perfectly healthy adults that got it and died.
Yeah, I know that as well. But generally speaking, if you look at, like, say, the Spanish flu is way deadlier, for example, to children than this one. I mean, very few people were affected negatively by COVID-19 who are under 18 years old.
Well, and it also just got used as a handle. And if you're holding onto that handle, then the government can kind of push whatever they want information-wise and keep other things at bay.
Yeah. I mean, the UN is trying to push, other, I'm trying to remember now, like environmental, climate crises, those are going to become the next emergency. Like, climate crisis. So, there's a massive fight right now. It's essentially a treaty that the World Health Organization wants us to push, like, for future pandemics. And, hopefully the Senate won't pass it anyway. There are people concerned about that sort of thing. But the point is, can we agree that if there is a gray question of free speech, we should err on the side of free speech?
Yes.
Yeah.
I agree.
So,
and I don't envy the government, which has to try to decide what is in the best interest of all people in times of crisis.
Well,
when people disagree, A, over what a crisis is, and B, over how much we trust the government.
Yeah.
It's just, I don't know.
Here's a tie.
Tough position to be in.
Here's a tie into our last article. There's a very famous quote by a Supreme Court justice, which basically said, "I'll know it when I see it," which is indecent speech, right? So not to say too much about that, but this is the Larry Flint question, right? Like, basically, my ability to produce these magazines is free speech. I totally disagree. Okay, in fact, I don't even think billboards are part of free speech. Okay, because that's in a public space, and I don't think anyone has a right to put anything on a billboard or on public land. I don't think billboards on interstate highways should be legal. Okay, so I'm kind of an absolutist about some of these things. I don't think pornography should be legal. I think it's indecent. Oh, now you're going to say, oh, well, one man's trash is another man's. What's indecent? It's tarred. I got it. Yeah. And so I always go back to that scene in the Howard Hughes movie with Leonardo DiCaprio, The Aviator. Yeah. Where he's like making a movie and he's got the caliber out measuring the cleavage. Because that's what you had to do in Hollywood. Like, when is too much cleavage illegal? Because they had decency laws. I don't know the answer, but I'd at least rather be fighting about it.
But there is a line somewhere.
There's a line.
Yeah.
And that's when the Supreme Court justice says, well, I know it when I see it. Well, like, I'm seeing it, bro. Yeah. and you're allowing it. It's allowed. There's no limiting principle. There's no restriction at all. Yeah. So I get it. So I'm actually, in some sense, I'm for the restriction of speech in things that are indecent. Those are two examples. So, but when it comes to, like, political ideas or social ideas or like information, like, we didn't know anything about COVID, and everything they told us was a lie. Yeah. Provably.
No, I know. Right? When I actually got COVID, I had someone that could get me some ivermectin. And so I was Googling just to see, like, how much should I take and is it safe? And it was impossible to find. I actually finally just had to text a friend of a friend who I knew was a doctor and was conservative and be like, can I take this? And he was like, it's safer than ibuprofen. I'm like, cool. Yeah. But I couldn't get the information readily.
I got hydroxychloroquine in advance. It did nothing for me or my wife. Monoclonal antibodies helped my wife a lot. My mother had ivermectin, took it, didn't help at all. She almost died. And her hemoglobin count got down to, like, below death thresholds, basically. And somehow she survived. So it's crazy what's going on.
Do you think that people should be able to say, like they did at one of our events, that COVID isn't real?
Well, I think they should be able to say it.
Right.
I wouldn't agree with it.
Sure. Well, that's, yeah.
It kind of depends.
What I thought
it depends on what the definition of COVID is,
Their perspective. We got the vaccine. So did all my friends and my parents. And
I got the vaccine.
All of our cases of COVID were very mild.
Yeah.
And we were thankful we got it.
Yeah. Yeah.
I got the vaccine and I got COVID and it sucked. And who knows what it would have been otherwise. But
I said I was going to make
COVID.
this next one a really, really short one, and I'm going to. It's from the Christian Post. It's the title of the article is "American Bible Society to Close Down $60 Million Museum," and basically, it's a museum. It was founded in 2021 by the American Bible Society. Y'all ever heard of that?
Well, I have some socks from there that someone brought me back.
That's cool. Okay.
That's all I know about it.
Anyway, they have a center. It's in Philadelphia. It was a $60 million museum. It sounded like super high tech. And the idea was to like get people interested in, like the Bible or the Christian worldview or something like that. So let me just finish this one thing. The center struggled from the onset, receiving only around $54,000 in ticket sales for the tax year of July 1, 2021 to June 30th, 2022. $11 million in expenses in that same time. That is pathetic.
Yeah, it's
I'm
terrible.
sorry. That's
It's terrible.
sad. I mean, it makes me sad. Like, I wish they were like profitable. But so I'm trying to figure out like, where's the flaw? I mean, like, God bless them for trying. But like, do we really think like in this day and age, to sound like an old grump, like building a $60 million museum in Philadelphia is a good idea? Was like they think tourists are going to go flock to the American Bible Center or something? Discovery Center.
Here's my read on this, and I think you both might disagree with me, but I'd love to know. My understanding reading this article was it's the Faith and Liberty Discovery Center, and it's all about pushing this idea that America is built completely on biblical principles. I take, shocker, a moderate view to this. The Bible is certainly influential in the founding documents. America is not a Christian nation, was not built on the Bible. And I think most people see through that at this point. And I think that's part of our cultural myth that has been rejected outright, is that we're a Christian nation. So I just think this was doomed to fail from the beginning when that's the narrative you're pushing.
I agree with half of what you said.
Great.
I think just the title, when I hear the title of the place, I think, oh boy, everyone's going to think this is about Christian nationalism or something.
Right.
And it's going to be about, like their gift shop is going to have ties that have like the Republican elephant with a cross next to it or something, and maybe they do. I don't know. It didn't go there. I'm with you on that. I think we probably disagree about the founding of the nation. I was just in Washington, D.C. and taking pictures of the Jefferson Monument and the Lincoln and just
Jefferson
so
and
much.
Franklin were not
I
moral
know
Christian men.
they were, I understand that they were deists. They were flawed, very flawed. I hate to tell you this, but so are you. Not a deist, but flawed.
Yes,
we all are.
Very, very.
And we don't need to get into an argument about whether it was based on Christian ideals. I think it was more than the current narrative has. Feel like the pendulum has sort of shifted. Like it's not at all that. Like okay, but I'm with you. If I saw the title of that, I would be like looking to see if any of my friends were watching me go in because what would they think? It's a January 6th.
Yeah.
Well, and here's my other take on this. If you're gonna bring the Bible, you want to get people interested in reading the Bible. If that's your goal, and I presume that's one of their goals, a museum is just not the way to do it in 2024. It's just not.
Yeah, I think that's another question. Yeah.
There's a bunch of other more cost efficient and more effective ways in our current age to spur interest in Scripture. I think.
I was, like I said, I was just in DC, and the last time I was in DC, I went to the Bible Museum, which a friend recently told me was closing, but they were referring to this. I'm glad because the Bible Museum is really cool. And if you're in DC, you should go. Except when I was there this last time, my sister was, what should we do? Do you want to do anything touristy? I was like, I kind of want to go back to the Bible Museum. It was so cool. But it's really prohibitively expensive, which is like a great irony, Yeah. Well, that was the thing.
I mean, look at their numbers and you know why. Yeah.
Well, so for our whole family to go, it was like, well, forget it. We will just go walk around the free stuff.
Yeah.
Which is a shame because having been, it is beautiful. And I don't just mean to the eye, I mean the messaging and the way they have all this interactive stuff that you can do that you walk away. There's no way you walk away and don't think there's any validity to the Bible,
That's cool.
The ark thing, the Answers in Genesis ark thing is, I think, pretty well attended. But that's not quite a gimmick, but I mean...
It's a little bit of a gimmick.
Yeah. So, but I will say, yes, we are a Christian nation. If not Christian, then what? But I listened to Gary DeMar's podcast, and he recently talked about a book that American Vision, which is what he works for, just published. And it was a book from the 1800s where this guy... I don't remember the name of the book, but he like tracked down like, primitive, what's the word? primary sources in libraries and like hand copied like a ton of stuff. And he produces like huge volume of like the Christian foundation of America. So yes, America. Now I have also said America is not a Christian nation in the sense that in our founding documents, we don't name Christ.
Yeah.
So
it's theistic.
There are principles that are inescapable from the Judeo-Christian worldview on which our civilization is built. So, but yeah, I think it's kind of, this is just a kind of an example of the way these are the kind of institutions that just kind of don't work anymore.
Agreed.
And that's too bad. But oh well, some Christian YouTube channels are doing really well. So, okay, last article. If you have children, let's just say it's the last thing we're going to talk about. So you might want to not listen with kids around. Just fair warning.
Hit the stop button here, and we'll see you next time.
Yeah. Okay. So that said, we're going to continue on the article, which we all think is actually a gigantic white pill. So, which is Pornhub suspends site in Texas due to state's age verification law. So other states have done this, but basically, Texas lawmakers in the House and Senate, they signed a bill wrote a bill, and the governor signed it saying you have to age verify your users, and I would hopefully the actors as well, if actor is the right word, or else you can't operate in our state. And so Pornhub decided we're not going to do that. And
then we're like, don't let the door hit you.
Yes, see ya. Yeah. So this is the way. So I think so. So Jesus said something like, "Be wise as." What do you say? Innocent as doves and shrewd as serpents?
Something like that.
Okay. Anyway, this is an example of how you're shrewd, right?
Yeah.
You use the law in a way that you force them to conform to a law. You force them to either do the work or to live by the standards that they profess. I mean, Pornhub in theory says we don't want people under 18 looking at our stuff, right?
Right.
So
there should be no problem.
And if you read this article, they look like absolute morons for how they respond to not wanting to cooperate with that, right?
Like, what about this? And you're like, no.
Because here's what they know, bro. And again, youth pastor, this is heavy on my heart, man. Mm-hmm. They know how many of those clicks that make them one of the top 5 websites in the world are teenagers, and even younger than teenagers in some cases. I mean, it's horrifying. They know that.
Not just clicks, but then interacting with perverts on the other.
Yes, sure. They know that is part of their success. Those numbers they give to advertisers to say advertise on our site. They know so many of those clicks are under 18.
Part of what I think is cool about it is it's my understanding that the age verification is you have to put in your driver's license information, which is, it kind of reminds me of in the Sermon on the Mount when Jesus is saying like turn the other cheek and walk the other mile and take off your tunic and cloak. It's not just a go above and beyond to be forgiving. It's when someone does something that's evil, you can be like almost paradoxically strategic about how to hold up a mirror to their evil. And that is what all those examples are. If you look at Roman culture, they're all things where it's like, okay, if they hit you on the right cheek, it's.
I want to key in on that.
Okay.
Okay. So what you're saying is it's not Jesus being nice. I mean, yes.
Right. No, I would say yes.
Jesus,
not.
Jesus is saying in the demonstration of giving the other cheek, you're actually kind of pointing out their evil.
Oh, for sure you are. Because it would have been a slave master. Because he talks about if someone strikes you on the right cheek, well, if I from here strike Scotty on the right cheek, it's a backhand. Yeah. It's a power dynamic at play that ought not be that way. Right. And so if you put the other one out there, it's like showing the jugular as if to point to the person and say, you are a monster.
Yeah. Yeah.
But you don't say it. I mean, it's just so clever. I mean, Jesus was just a ninja, right? I mean, and all 3 of them are something like that. They're all this clever way to hold up a mirror to someone's evil without wagging your finger. Right.
It's and like so this is one of while serving them.
Yes.
Let's do all of it. Yeah.
It's like Paul says in Romans 12, if your enemy is hungry, thirsty, give him something to drink and eat. In doing this, you heap burning coals. And so people are like, what does that mean? Right. That was my confirmation verse. And I was like, what does this mean, Pastor? I was like, I like the enemy and the thirsting and hungry thing, but I don't know. What is the coal thing? He's like, well, it demonstrates, you're exposing them to their sin.
Yes.
And by showing them grace. Yes. And so we hold them to their own standard. This is, it's kind of like pushing the antithesis in apologetics. It's like, I'm going to hold you to the standard that you espouse, and we're going to take it to its logical conclusion.
And my point about the driver's license thing is you're making them basically sign on to say, I am this person, and I want to come in this room.
Right.
And that feels icky to a lot of people. And so they're like, well, we wouldn't want to make people feel icky about looking at porn. So so they left.
Yeah.
So great. I hope it keeps going. It's interesting. When I was growing up, my dad is a pastor, and he and several other pastors were part of this coalition that basically drove all printed, because there was no internet then, but all printed porn out of our city.
Wow.
So there was no 7-Eleven, get your whatever hustler. I don't know, whatever.
Wow.
Yeah. And I remember thinking like, oh, so you really like the good guys can actually affect change. And this is the same thing happening, but on the internet.
Here's the other part of this that I liked as I read is Texas wants to require a health warning also.
Oh, yeah. Yeah,
So
yeah.
it's age verification and then also a...
About your brain.
Yes. Because, and this is what I tell teenagers too, is like...
It's true.
You don't realize, that's part of my story, porn addiction is part of my story that God's healed me through, is like, you don't realize what it's doing to your brain and that it is the same as drugs. Like, I mean, there's an organization that battles porn called Fight the New Drug, because it affects your brain. You get addicted to it like you would get addicted to a substance.
It's that dopamine thing all over again.
But it also, erodes the centers of your brain that drugs do. I mean, it's absolutely horrifying.
Yeah, and since no kids are listening, it's the like erectile dysfunction, like in young men, because it's like the brain is not working. You're physically fine, but the brain isn't working. So
So anyway, I just appreciate this very much. This is where Evan and I align completely. I wish porn was illegal.
Same.
For a lot of reasons, but particularly how it affects.
Let's get porn
teenagers.
first, marijuana second,
Oh my gosh. That's your second?
alcohol third.
Oh my gosh.
I'm kidding.
Bye bye theology by the
I'm
pint.
Yeah, for real.
I'm not that much of a prohibitionist, but yeah.
That's hilarious.
By the way, I want to go back and white pill something from earlier, just because when we were talking about the Bible closing down and they want to get people to know more about the Bible, how can we do it? And it's not a museum in 2024. I agree with you. Especially not an expensive one. But I think, and all of the conversations we've been having today, one of the things that we can do to foster mental health, get away from isolation, tell people about the Bible without them paying $28 for a ticket, is just have people around a meal in our homes.
Amen.
Like I'm just more and more realizing what a difference that makes to have some very simple hospitality, good food, good conversation, lingering over a meal, over a table. I mean, it's biblical. Yeah. And have the real kind of conversations where people can say like, hey, I've struggled with this in the past and this is how God has freed me from it. Anyway.
Dude.
Well, I know Sarah want to hear this. I had lunch today before I came here
Rude without me. I do not want to hear that.
with someone I met through Theology
yay.
on Tap. And let's say we have some profound disagreements, but we've met for lunch several times.
Aw.
And I keep confidence, but it's interesting, because it's like, well, it's a civil conversation. And we can disagree and we can both agree.
It's incredible how sharing a meal opens that up. No, Sarah, you're on the money. I've asked, so two thoughts in response to you. One, I did some research for Texas Baptist 2 years ago on Gen Z, and the main thing that kept coming back was, it feels like older people want to welcome me to their church, but not to their home. They want to welcome me to their church, but not to their family. Yeah. And so much the solution would have been invitations,
after church, come
invitations to dinner, invitations to lunch, invitations to coffee, et cetera. I've asked a lot of folks this because I dream about church planning one day. I've said, what if half of our Sundays were around tables sharing a meal instead of looking at a stage? And then I've asked this, what if instead of overcomplicating outreach and missions and saying we have to be every solution to every problem. I said, what if we planted a church that all we did was we helped people out of porn addiction, we helped families foster and adopt children, and we provided resources for single moms. I said, what if a church was really good at those three?
Sounds like kind of widows and orphans type ministry.
Imagine. I said, what if a church is really,
that.
and everyone I talk to is like, that'd be crazy. I'm like, it's crazy that's crazy. It's crazy that like that's such a radical idea that this is what the church should be stepping in and doing, and the solutions we could provide without the government, we can, we can stand in the gap. And
tying it all together too, like the first two about how we're unhappy and about how we're, mental health and da-da-da-da. So again, you have these inverse relationships, like porn goes up, happiness, mental health goes down. Anybody going to connect those dots, But these are the things we can't say. Because basically the sexual revolution has mandated that sex is good and that we're all libertarians on this issue now. And
Yeah.
I don't know. I think the answers are so obvious, but
Well, we had some people over for dinner a few weeks ago, and I actually like hit it out of the park on the meal. I don't always, and it's kind of a running joke with a friend of mine, but this one was tasty. But the text I got back later that night was, "Thank you so much. I needed that laughter." They didn't say anything about my salmon, but or my compound butter, but the laughter was what they needed, and I love that. I was like, "Oof, okay, I can do that."
yeah.
Anyway.
That's a great note to end on. Okay. Scotty, where can people find you?
I'm off social media right now for Lent, but
Nice.
sugarlandbaptist.org. Come visit us if you're in greater Southwest Houston. We'd love to have you at our church, welcome you to our community.
And Scotty will invite you to lunch afterwards.
In fact, I will, but I'll make an even bigger pitch. The week after Easter, so April 7th, we have a church-wide barbecue that's open to anyone in the community. I am pitmastering 1,300 pounds of brisket and pork. It's going to be incredible. It's $10. It's $10 if you pre-order it. You can't get a 3-meat barbecue plate anywhere in Houston for $20. We're doing $10 for a 3-meat barbecue plate with sides. $15 at the door if you just want to show up April 7th. Bring your family, eat some barbecue.
How are you doing that? You got like an underwriter?
Love a Jesus.
We budget for it. Yeah,
Okay.
It's one of the things we budget for.
Okay, cool. I like that.
We value that.
Yeah, I've quit eating barbecue. I can't afford it anymore. Yeah, but I have a pit. So
See you on April 7th.
I'm not a pit master, but I do make my own stuff. Okay.
Y'all are both very good at smoking meats. Well, I've tasted yours. I've only heard about yours. Where can people find me? Everywhere.
Yeah.
Social media, Theology by the Pint, website, at our events. Yeah.
And you can find me at First Lutheran, flhouston.org. So if you're in the city and looking for a traditional church, let us know.
I want to say one more thing since we talked about the round of table. Because this is going out before Easter, if you live in Houston and you don't have a place to go on Easter, just family stuff. I mean, all the churches are good churches, but contact me. You can come to my house.
There you go.
We're doing a potluck.
Very cool.
Yep.
Cool. All right. Well, it's been fun. We'll see you next time. Until then, we encourage you to question freely, think deeply, and disagree as needed.